Disclaimer. This episode contains discussions of a death investigated as a possible suicide, including detailed descriptions of evidence, injuries, and investigative findings. Please take care while listening. Greetings, and welcome to Love and Justice. In our last episode, Dr. Paul Uribe left us thinking about something we've heard from multiple doctors and forensic experts. While Andrew's death could be explained as a suicide, everyone acknowledged how rare and unusual this case is. Again and again, the experts emphasized that the evidence cannot be understood in isolation. It must be examined as part of a larger picture. We need someone who can help us think through crime scene reconstruction, blood spatter, probability, and whether the physical evidence actually makes sense together. So Alexa from our team started reaching out, looking for someone who could bring a different kind of expertise to room number 12. And it didn't take long before she called me with a lead.
So, I've spent the last week doing research, and I have found some really strong resources that I think can help us investigate further. Not only does this exist, but there are certain experts that have done very similar recreations for different cases. I have reached out to 4 different companies who specialize this, and I got a response.
Oh my god, I'm on pins and needles.
Yeah. Scott Roeder from Evidence Room. They are a company that specializes in forensic animation, crime scene reconstruction, 3D modeling, you name it. He was very intrigued with my initial reach out. He mentioned that it was a prime case for forensic 3D reconstruction, that it would help us test self-infliction feasibility, all the things that we want.
Wow.
He basically said this would do it. He shared the material needed, the proposed deliverables, and our favorite, the timeline. He said, I'm happy to take a phone call if you'd like to discuss it further.
Okay. Well, let's get on a call.
I own a company called Evidence Room. We employ a group of medical illustrators and other legal professionals to put together the reconstruction. So the first thing we do is we would build a 3D model of the victim and then plot out every individual wound and look at the pathology and directionality, put it in the room in the context, and then we'd have to work on biomechanics, internal injuries, and so on. We can, in fact, determine certain behaviors of what's going on in the room based on the injuries, based on the blood stain, based on what was moved, what was touched, what was collected, how the body was found. There are hypothetical scenarios that we can rule out certain behavior. Like we can rule out multiple people in the room, or we could rule in multiple people in the room. So that could give us a visual interpretation of, well, if the wounds are here, here, and here, and these are the wounds that are ultimately fatal, this was his final resting position, this is where the blood was, we can determine certain biomechanical behaviors to the knife, to the blood, to the body, to match up physical nature of the injury as opposed to nature of the death. Those questions can be answered whether or not it's feasible to actually physically do it to yourself. And we can answer that in the sequence with regard to the amount of blood loss, the location of the stab wounds, the blood evidence, but I think maybe just as importantly about whether you can physically do it is coming to a conclusion to a degree of scientific certainty. Is it more probable than not based on the totality of the circumstances? So we can come to a determination of, is it physically possible? Maybe, depending we look at it, maybe a 2% chance it's physically possible. But even if there's a 10% chance or even a 15 to 20% chance that it's physically possible, that still does not get outweighed by the totality of the circumstances of what's going on. So I think we can answer that question in a micro, but then bring it back as to how is that relevant in the macro sense of the total investigation.
Yeah. Wow. That is great. And kind of music to our ears.
Just from my point as a professional in the field, where I'm a testifying expert, I'm in the prime of my career. I'm 53 years old. I testify on a monthly basis on murder cases and civil cases around the world. And so to maintain my integrity, I would like to be able to provide these things to you as a report, as something I would testify to, and submit it for peer review of prosecutors and other lawyers and family lawyers so that they can use it ultimately in the course of the actual investigation to actually augment it.
You know, that's incredible. And I think it would be very welcomed. You know, this is obviously a case where the family has had a lot of questions for the past 25 years. We told the family when we approached them about doing this podcast that we want the truth, whatever that may be, and that will involve us playing a little bit of devil's advocate here as we look at all the different sides and talk to many different experts. And to the family's credit, they've very much welcomed our devil's advocate approach, I think.
Something I tell my clients, they're like, we want to know if we're going to win. I'm like, listen, that's not my department. My department is to tell you what it is. And that's it. That's a different department if you want it the way you want it. This is not Burger King. We don't give it your way. We do it the right way. I'll state for the record, since we're being recorded, that as a member of the ethics board for the American Crime Scene Reconstruction Association, and after working 25 years and 3,000 cases in the field, I don't guarantee an outcome to a client, regardless if I'm friendly with them or I talk to them or have any kind of professional courtesy. But I do find it best practices and methods to not have unnecessary communication with emotionally involved people or people who stand to benefit as a result of the outcome. And even when I'm hired by a lawyer, I definitely give a qualification that this is an objective opinion with no undue influence and consideration for the fee. The fee is for the work that we do, not the result that we come to.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're looking for here.
Typically, from the time I first look at something and weaving it into my schedule, 30, 60, 90 days, I'd say on the 30-day basis, I'm going to have a pretty good idea of what I'm doing, and I'm going to have at least a storyboard and an outline of the things that I'm investigating. By 60 days, I'm going to have fully developed theories. And by 90 days, I'm going to have final opinions and conclusions to testing.
Amazing. Well, it sounds like Alexa and I have our work cut out for us. So I think we're going to go off and see what we can do to raise funds on our end so that hopefully we can get you started on this case as soon as possible.
I feel like I know what you guys are about. I like both of you, if that counts for anything. Is there anything else that you want to know from me?
I think we've touched base on everything. Incredibly helpful, and it definitely gives us a good starting point to kind of circle back and see what we can get and where we can get moving.
I'm all in. If you want me, I want you.
Talking to Scott Roeder opened our eyes to what might finally be possible in Andrew's case. For the first time, it feels like we might have an opportunity to test some of the questions that have lingered over Andrew's case for nearly 25 years. But opportunities like this are not free. As our team started to search for a way to fund the work, we learned about the Higher Hope Foundation, founded by true crime storyteller Kendall Rae and her husband, Josh. The foundation offers a grant called the Hope Grant, which provides direct financial assistance to families affected by violent crime, helping to cover crucial expenses during their journey toward justice and healing. Whether supporting funeral costs, private investigator fees, or other essential needs, the Higher Hope Foundation exists to offer transparent, dignified support when families need it most. So our team worked in tandem with the Wieman family to apply for a grant.
Okay, well, we've done our due diligence here. We've checked and double-checked. Now all that's left is that super easy step of clicking the apply button that doesn't make anyone nervous whatsoever.
I did it. I did it.
You did it?
I did it.
Oh my God.
Nothing's happening. Oh, we did. Okay, we did it.
We did it.
Oh, check your email, because it should say you've received your...
Oh, yeah. Wait, hold on. It says, Dear Love and Justice, thank you for your interest in Higher Hope Foundation's financial assistance grants. We have received your submission, and our team is looking forward to reviewing the details. We have a high influx of submissions at this time, but we are working diligently to provide a status as soon as possible. Whether you are approved or denied, you will receive a response. Regards, the Higher Hope Foundation.
Okay.
Oh my God, I suddenly just got really nervous.
I have goosebumps. I don't know why I have goosebumps, but I do.
Why am I all of a sudden just like really excited and tingly and nervous and just an abundance of feelings all at the same time?
This is what we've been working on for the last few weeks.
Yeah.
Like the big buildup for it. So as soon as we get this back and we get a fingers crossed a yes, we pull the trigger on Scott and we can start finally getting some sort of answers. Whatever those answers may be, we start getting something.
Yeah. Oh, now I have goosebumps. Yeah, it's because we've been working on this for the last 2 weeks. We know, especially after I talked to Dan and Carly earlier this week, how excited they were and what a difference this genuinely could mean. I told Dan and Carly this too. It's such a well-named grant, the Hope Grant. Like, honest to goodness, you could make this the campaign of their organization. Like, you could see, at the risk of sounding cliche, you could see the hope in Dan and Carly's eyes. You really could. You really could. So
this could be huge. It could definitely be huge.
Wow. Okay.
Less than 2 weeks later, we got a response from the Higher Hope Foundation. And I called Dan, Andrew's brother, and his wife Carly to give them an update. We heard back on the grant.
Oh, wow.
And they approved it.
Dude, that's amazing.
They approved the entire amount.
Incredible.
How generous. Wow. Oh, that's so exciting.
So that means we're going to be able to move ahead with all the stuff with Scott Roeder.
Oh, that's incredible.
That's amazing.
That's so weird. I'm like, I gotta stay busy, Kyle. I gotta go to the kitchen.
Dan is overwhelmed.
Overstimulated.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean, but it's a good overwhelming, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's been kind of like a dream in a way for a long time.
Fun. Trying to get like a weird. It's surreal because you don't even think that this is a reality, and now it is.
Yeah.
I mean, after all these years of wanting something like this, and
It's hard to believe.
Yeah.
that's just, it's incredible. I mean, it's been 25 years of questions,
25 years of questions. And now, for the first time, we are one step closer to having fresh eyes examine Andrew's case. We could not have reached this point without the incredible experts who have generously shared their time, knowledge, and perspectives along the way. Each conversation has helped us to better understand the evidence, challenge assumptions, and prepare us for what comes next. It feels like this has been a moment we've been building towards. So we organized and digitized every single file we could find, and then sent the entire case to Scott Roeder for review. And after that, all we could do was wait for our first conversation. Oh, it looks like Scott Roeder has just entered the chat, so I'm going to let him in.
Well, hi, everybody.
Hello, hello.
Good to see everybody. I did a decent review of the material, and I'm just kind of getting in and doing some of the analysis. And number one thing that jumps out at me here, it's just insanity. It doesn't make any sense. There's a lot of wounds here. Now, could it have been really fast and a quick incapacitation in under a minute? Yeah, probably. It's possible. But the way that they're spaced out and so on. So we have put together a series of drawings and a 3D model of the overall injuries. Now, when we say 29 individual wounds, it's slightly misleading in a certain kind of a way. He had 2 lateral wrist slits here and here with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 verticals and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 verticals, but they're all very surface. They might have a little bit of bleeding, but none of those are life-threatening. Maybe permanent scarring, but most of those are just kind of scratches. He also had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 small surface cuts to his temple and about 5 or 6 relatively shallow wounds in his chest and torso area. He had one particular wound in his torso area that was to the right center up from the left nipple, which is right in the heart. And that's the one that penetrated and ultimately killed him. He also had a slash across his throat and then both wrists with defensive wounds on his right palm. The number one line that Megan and I were floored by was post-mortem penetrating injury to the left eye. Post-mortem penetrating injury to the left eye is not a possible thing to do in an unassisted way. Unfortunately, there's not autopsy photographs, but the descriptions are good enough that we can visualize them and show you the seriousness and the implausibility of the self-inflicted manner of these wounds. The wounds to the scalp, blunt force trauma to the head, the small wounds, defensive wounds, bruises on the wrist, bruises on the forearm. He was being attacked. He was in a fight. I just have a lack of words, even in the year 2001, for the lack of professional documentation of this case is negligible. Right off the bat, the level of detail that they pulled out of this crime scene is almost a crime in and of itself, to spoil the evidence in such a manner that we might not be able to find it. But this is an incompetent investigation. Totally and wholly dismissive.
What makes you say that?
Well, the fact that they didn't document the scene correctly. To go through a crime scene, whether it's a suicide or a homicide or a robbery or a murder, it doesn't matter. It's the same methodology in every single crime. They didn't do any of that. You know what's interesting? It just occurred to me, I mean, the truly heinous nature of this crime, that some of his injuries were these like shallow stab injuries, right? And he did have a pretty good head injury, but I think he would have been aroused from temporary incapacitation with the other injuries. So the torment and pain, almost torture, that he could have gone through seems so emotionless.
I'm curious, when you talk about how a majority of those wounds are those kind of more surface level wounds, is that something that you, in your experience, would commonly see in other cases where you have a lot of surface wounds and then 1 or 2 fatal wounds?
We do see what's called hesitation wounds in suicides, but the hesitation wound would be in the area where the fatality wound occurred. And the fact that he had these random I wouldn't call them hesitation wounds, I'd call them torture wounds. For example, in a case where a woman cuts her wrist and sits in a bathtub to die, you might see 5, 6, 7 like shallow wounds before you get that deep cut. Here we've got a shallow horizontal, shallow vertical, shallow, everything's shallow. Everything's shallow. And they have one deep penetrating wound. One thing that I can tell right here, if we're looking at the first image, the chest wound that you talk about, the right nipple and the one right next to the right nipple, the knife is oriented differently there. The knife is oriented north to south. And then the other ones, the knife is oriented east to west. And then we have a kind of a northeast, and then that V. That's 2 separate hand motions. This doesn't look like it's done by the same hand or by the same person. These do not look self-inflicted because the orientation of these are all from different angles, which means that you're using a different hand, you know. So we have in, and then turn it in, and then a sideways, and then slash and sideways. So if you're hesitating, you know, you're doing more like you're sticking it in. How it hurts. Like you don't know. Plus you're hitting bone, right? So like if you put it in, if you're trying to find a space in between bone, but for here to go all the way in 3 inches and 3 inches, I don't think so, man. Yeah, no, I don't think that's consistent with self-inflicted based on the different angles the knife is coming in.
So you don't think the other wounds on his chest are consistent with hesitation wounds.
No.
Because
not saying
of the fact that they're all at different angles.
Right, exactly. Different angles, particularly different angles, because you'd have to be repositioning the knife. And I would assume he's doing this left-handed. If he was...
What was his predominant hand? Do you remember?
Yeah, he's right-handed.
He's right-handed, okay. Well, his right hand has all kinds of defensive wounds on it, okay? Yeah. So how would he be using his right hand to stab himself and then having his right hand wounded on several fingers? If you look at the photographs, maybe he got his hand free and tried to grab the blade.
Interesting. Okay. What do you make of, and I might be asking this question prematurely, but obviously there's been discussion in our previous talks about blood splatter on the scene. There's photos of some of that throughout the room. What do you start to make of that? I realize maybe you haven't gone as deep into the blood splatter analysis yet as you might.
Yeah, and just so that we don't have to, it's spatter.
Spatter. Sorry.
Yeah, there's no L. No, there's no L. Yeah. Everybody makes that mistake, but it's spatter.
This is why we're all learning something new on.
Right. I mean, it does, blood spatter does also splatter, but it is called blood spatter. Okay. There's definitely going to be a lot of transfer stains. Okay. So if there's other people involved in this process, and if the non-fatal wounds were done pre-mortem while he's still alive, those will bleed substantially. Although I don't think that there would be any ulterior spurting, which is where you nick something like your carotid artery or something like that, where the blood would literally spurt out, like poking a hole in a bed, right? Because of the blood pressure. But I think you would have bleeding, and you would hit these people that, I'm assuming if this is a homicide, the person or persons doing this would have also blood on them as well. And then they would be moving about the room. But we haven't tracked the blood yet in the room to see if there's a physical sequencing that we can add to it, like it's thicker here, it's thinner there, so on and so forth. Or were there points in time where this didn't happen in the bed? Was this a hand-to-hand struggle combat, and then they finally got him in the bed, and then that's when the fatality happened and where the most of the bloodletting is? So we haven't really gone through the sequencing of what the blood tells us yet, but that'll be in our probably 60-day checkup.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. Interesting.
What we've done essentially already is reviewed the physical evidence related to the injuries so that we can visualize the mechanism and manner of injury and or causation leading to the death, which includes physiology, injury location, pain factors, and sequencing of the injuries. Now we need to start implementing the weapon, the environment, the room, and the blood spatter to then start to evaluate the interrelationship of the evidence to show how the body matches up to the other evidence in the room. It's called a deconstruction. Start with what you know and then build back to what you don't know. And then there's going to be some hypotheses there of, okay, well, what would this look like if it was a suicide? And what are the factors that prevent it from being a suicide in my mind? We talked about a few of those already. And then let's look at, well, what if there was multiple perpetrators or one or more people in the room torturing, and then ultimately something happens where we have the death wounds? What does that look like? How does that match up with the rest of the room? We're going to over-deliver, okay? We're going to give you way more than you pay for, no matter what, because I'm obsessive-compulsive over things. And that's why I'm not wealthy, is because I want to get things and I want to be curious, right? Curiosity beats profit every time.
And that's great. We always like to play the devil's advocate. Right now, as we're looking at this 30-day kind of mark, there's a lot of things that lean us to, ooh, maybe it's not suicide. What's the argument for suicide as you look at what you see here?
From just the physical and forensic evidence?
Yeah.
Not a whole lot. The insincerity and myopic nature of the suicide note is seen in the non-fatal wounds as well. I see a lack of purpose, a lack of design, a lack of excitement, a lack of emotion, a lack of pain, a lack of anger. I see calculated like if a student was going to be like, what would a suicide look like? What would a suicide note look like? It just seems conjured to me. I want to know what happened in Tahoe for New Year's Eve.
So we've talked to somebody that was with Andrew in Tahoe on New Year's Eve. Is that information that's helpful to share with you right now?
Yeah, I want that. Yeah,
okay, great.
Yeah.
So I think overall, the report that we got, which is a pretty direct first-hand report from one of Andrew's good friends, was Tahoe was pretty normal. Yeah. Like nothing was going on in Tahoe.
Nothing crazy.
No wild stories. And they said, everybody came back that night to the hotel room. They all kind of passed out in the wee hours of the morning. They woke up the next morning. People trickled off back to wherever they were heading. Andrew ultimately headed back to Davis New Year's Day. They got back to the fraternity house, were pretty hungover and feeling a bit rough. And so from all signs, it was a pretty lazy day. They're lollygagging around, having their hangovers, taking their naps. They're watching TV in the evening. I think there was mention of watching episodes of Frasier on the television or whatever. Around 1 o'clock in the morning, Andrew tells the others that are in the fraternity house at the time, all right, guys, I'm off to bed. I've had enough of this. Goes to bed. And that was the last time anyone saw him for 60 hours until they're going into the room to find his body.
And that's where the witnesses are lying. That's right where I would stress test the big fat lie. Right there. They're the secret society for a reason. Because you keep secrets. It's not uncommon for men in the fraternities to make their own little suicide note as a cover your ass letter for the fraternity. A CYA note, right? That might explain the overall vagary of that letter and the lack of emotion in it. And that makes sense to me. I expect them to keep secrets. It's part of their nature. There is no way that nobody didn't go to that room for 60 hours. I call bullshit.
I guess I'm of two minds in some ways. There's part of me that says, okay, it was still over the holidays. Everyone's coming and going. They're going to see families. They're enjoying their last few hours before the holiday break is over. But then there's also part of me that goes, I don't know that I buy that nobody saw, heard from anything for 60 hours.
Well, yeah, because you have to base it on what you know and what you have. Just because the information you have is incomplete, it's hard to prove a negative. I don't want to get into what's possible, because anything's possible. I could not be here right now. I could be a hologram, right? It's possible that I could be... It's not probable that I could be a hologram, but it's possible. So I don't want to get into possibilities. Possibility has no place in criminal investigations. It's all about probabilities, not possibilities. Was this ruled a suicide?
It was ultimately determined a suicide, yeah.
From the medical examiner?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. I feel confident we could get this thing undetermined at minimum on this one.
Wow. Have you seen cases before that have turned one way or another?
Yeah. We've been involved on several.
Is there something that the authorities are ultimately looking for when they are reclassifying a case like this?
Not to bruise their ego.
Ooh.
So having somebody willing to investigate it, having somebody willing to fund it. The most important factor, though, is having a cop who's willing to take an outsider's opinion and having a medical examiner willing to take an outsider's opinion.
Yeah. I think these are all good things for us to kind of keep in mind as we're getting into this process. Before we wrap here, Lisa, do you have any questions you want to ask or bring up?
Just taking it all in.
Yeah. No, that's how it should be. That's why I like doing this 30, 60, 90-day process. We look at the case, we set it down, we look at it again, we set it down. We don't just power through it because you want the information to wash over you. We call it stewing. You let the information stew and then you go back to it. You can use more discernment, be more judicial in your thinking. And I think, Lisa, you have the right temperament on it. Let it stew and we'll see what comes later. as we get more components, we're building something, and it will reveal itself to us, I think, ultimately, to a degree of scientific probability. But right now, we're making it. We're building it piece by piece, but we don't need to prejudge it just yet. I have indications. I have hypotheses that we are going to be testing. We're going to go through sequencing. We're going to go through the blood. We're going to go through what is and is not able to be done, what does and does not make sense. And we can talk about those in pretty great depth. I think now that we're pretty solid on what happened to the body, well, now we need to put the body in position with different scenarios.
With the surroundings.
Yeah, right.
Right. This is all really great. Thank you all. I can't emphasize enough how much I love this partnership between our podcast, which we value ourselves and pride ourselves at being independent, and you guys coming at this from your own independent lens. This is such a good pairing, and we absolutely love everything that you guys have done. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
It's interesting because when the pursuit of justice and art and intelligent, curious people come together, and when we have synchronicity of that, good things happen.
Well, thank you guys again. This is fantastic. Really, really great. We're excited to see what comes in another 30 days, and we'll keep chugging along and stewing until then, I suppose.
Sounds good. Great to see you, Alexa, Lisa, and the gregarious and lovable Kyle.
In Kyle we trust.
In Kyle we trust. No, you're a very likable individual, Kyle. We'll see you in 30 days or so. We'll keep working.
I look forward to it.
Bye-bye.
See you soon. While Scott's investigation has only just begun and is in the early days, it's clear that a new perspective has entered the chat. One that now forces us to step back and say, if this isn't a suicide, and we're looking at a potential homicide, then what's the motive? On the next episode of Love and Justice. It seems like everybody has been asking us about the fraternity brothers. And we've finally found one who is willing to talk.
But those two instances together kind of start to paint a picture of maybe Kappa Sigmas are bad guys or up to some things. So I can see people starting to talk about, like, what's going on.
Love and Justice is an official production of Magic Lamp Productions and is primarily recorded in California. This episode was executive produced and hosted by me, Kyle Olson. Supervising producer, Alexa Lopez. Producer, Lisa Visione. Edited by Cody Crabb. Special thanks to Amanda Crabb, Bob Graytrix, Brendan Allen McClanahan, Carlos Vera, Ethan Rosenberg, Haley Gabby, Mick Alpert, PJ McCabe, Richard Levichin Jr., Roxanne DePalma, and Stephen Paul. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast and rate it 5 stars. Every single review greatly helps our exposure and helps us share Andrew's story with a larger audience. So please rate this podcast and share it with your friends today. If you have a tip, question, or thought, please call our hotline at 209-764-5683. That's 209-764-LOVE. Until next time, thanks for listening. This episode covered difficult material. If it brought up anything for you, please reach out for support. In the United States, you can call or text 988 to reach the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, available 24/7 for free and confidential help. You can also chat with someone at 988lifeline.org.